Hi, everyone. Welcome to Social Studies Online. My name is Eden Cho, and I'm a museum educator at the National Museum of American History. We're so excited to have you here with us today for a very special edition of Social Studies Online. If you're a regular here, you'll know that we're normally live here on Thursdays, but for this week only, we're here on a Wednesday. So we'll spend the next half an hour talking about an important social studies question: what is our moral obligation during times of crisis? So before I turn it over to our host, I do want to encourage everyone to ask us any questions during our time here. And the way to do that is to comment in the chat box. We also encourage you to not post any personal information when you're commenting, and we hope you enjoy. So now I'm going to turn over the introductions to our host today, Orlando.
Thank you, Eden, and everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of Socialize Online. As Eden said, this is a special edition. We are very happy to be supporting some of our local schools here who are working or about to work on a unit that answers this question, which is, what is our moral obligation during times of crisis? And as Eden said, there are three of us today here. My name is Orlando Serrano. I'm also with the National Museum of American History. And we have with us a very special guest, Amanda Moniz, who is the David M. Rubenstein Curator of Philanthropy, with us at the National Museum of American History. So, Amanda, it is great to have you back with us. For those of you who have the time and curiosity, Amanda was with us a few weeks ago on the April 2nd edition of Social Studies Online. And that conversation was about, what is our community and how does our community relate to the nation? So, Amanda, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Wonderful. And, before we go ahead and get started with some of our cultural resources, I do want to echo what Eden said, that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. We will get to them. Eden will stop us in our tracks if we are talking too much and answer your questions. And before we get started, Amanda, can you please remind us a little bit about how you conceptualize the idea of philanthropy, and then, say a little bit about how it ties to our question of the day?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Philanthropy is giving time or effort to support other people to promote social change. It can involve giving money or giving goods such as food or diapers, but it is not just about giving money. Some people associate it with giving large financial gifts, but it's really much broader.
Wonderful. Excellent. Now, as a curator, to warm up our vocal cords here, can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing your work at home now? How is collecting or research, how is that going at home, and what are some of the projects that you're working on at the moment?
Absolutely. So what curators do is to collect objects, curate exhibits at the museum, share objects through digital platforms, and do research. So some of that I'm able to do at home, and some of my work has changed. I'm sharing more things digitally online, for instance, by participating in webcasts like this. I've really been working on improving records of the objects I've collected, so that if you search online at our website, which is at SI Collections search, collections.si.edu, there's more information about the objects we have in our collection.
That's great, and very helpful for folks who want to do research, or for folks who, now thanks to open access that we have at Smithsonian, if you want to make a t-shirt, apparently, you might be able to find some philanthropic cultural resource to do that with. Okay, all right, now we're going to start with our first object here. Can you tell us a little bit about how you conceptualize the objects that you brought together today? What was the frame that you worked within to put these together to talk about, moral obligations during a time of crisis?
So what I wanted to show with the objects I selected is that different Americans have thought about the question of moral obligation in different ways at different times. There is no one right way to think about what our moral obligation during a time of crisis is. It really has depended on different contexts and has meant different things to different people in different periods.
Okay. And we can see here from the description, from the quote here, that this is a ceremonial fireman's trumpet from Philadelphia around 1850. Can you say a little bit about this object, maybe how it was used then and who used it?
Right, so this object is a ceremonial trumpet that would have been used in firemen's parades or other special events like that. In this case, this object was given by a group of African-American women in Philadelphia around 1850 to a group of white volunteer firemen.
Okay. And I think that on the next tile, we have an inscription here. Can you say, it says here, presented to the Goodwill Engine Company by the colored women of Philadelphia as a token of their appreciation of their manly, heroic, and philanthropic efforts displayed upon various trying occasions in defense of the persons, rights, and property of their oppressed fellow citizens. Okay, so what was the Goodwill Engine Company and who were the colored women of Philadelphia?
The Goodwill Engine Company was a volunteer fire company made up of white men who joined the company to help to put out fires in Philadelphia. The Colored Women of Philadelphia does not refer to a group. It does not refer to a formal organization. It was a group, as far as I understand. It's a group of women who came together to present this ceremonial trumpet to the Goodwill Engine Company to thank them and to acknowledge their heroism in saving members of the African-American community during a crisis.
Okay, and so is that sort of the reason why that you selected this particular object to start out with? Is that how you see the work of the Goodwill Engine Company tying to the idea of having a moral responsibility during times of crisis?
So I chose this object because it helps us understand how African-American women in Philadelphia were thinking about the concept of moral obligation and how they were emphasizing their understanding of moral responsibility using this presentation trumpet, using this gift. By giving the gift with this very meaningful inscription on it, they were saying that moral responsibility meant helping people who were different from you, from a different background. And they were also asserting their own humanity and dignity by saying, we deserve to be helped. We deserve to be part of the community of moral responsibility in Philadelphia.
I appreciate you pointing out that this was, a group of colored women or folks in the colored community of Philadelphia during the 1850s, giving this to all white volunteer companies, because this is right leading up to the Civil War. So the fact that, as you just pointed out, folks who are not part of one community were helping out another does say a lot about what we can do or what is possible in terms of helping out others during times of crisis. Okay.
Yeah, it's very important to understand the context here. So the context of this gift was that some white Philadelphians rioted rioted against the African-American community. So there was a lot of violence, there were fires. So the African-American community was under threat. And these riots happened periodically. It wasn't an isolated incident. So in that context, the African-American women were highlighting the white men who stood up and helped to protect them and had a broader conception of moral responsibility at this point.
Yeah, no, context absolutely it is everything. And, this next object is important to consider context as well. So this says here, again, based on the description, that this is a Near East relief poster around World War I. So if we look at it, a little bit closer up, we can definitely see some pathos. There's ruins in the background of this woman carrying a child, very reminiscent. If any of you folks out there have studied art or are interested in art history, this is a very Madonna and child looking depiction of this woman and child. Now, can you please tell us about the folks here, the American Committee for Relief in the Near East?
Yes, so this was an organization established in 1915 by a group of prominent Americans to raise funds to help people in what was then called the Near East, places like Armenia, Syria, Greece, Turkey, in a humanitarian crisis. There was war in the Ottoman Empire was falling apart. There was war, a lot of dislocation and suffering. And this organization was raising money to provide humanitarian relief.
Okay, and how did they do that? What were some of the, and so this is clearly, it's outlining that they're campaigning for nearly $30 million. What were some of the methods that these folks used to raise these funds?
Right, so the poster is one example of part of the fundraising effort. Posters were used to raise awareness and raise funds. People raised money through newspaper appeals. There are a range of different ways that the committee would have reached out to the public to raise funds.
And what were the products, the outputs that folks used the funds for? How was the money used for the folks in the Near East?
Right, so food distribution was important, building schools, building orphanages. The organization sent people to the field to work on these projects. So that those sort of efforts.
Okay. So in our first resource, we've got, the Ceremonial Trumpet. We've got one community recognizing the work of another community during a time of crisis when Black Philadelphians were under siege, right? And here we've got another instance again where one community is reaching out towards another. In the first instance, it seemed like it was a lot of defending and repair work. And here we've got fundraising going to helping another community. So those are two ways already in which folks have responded during times of crisis. And if we move on to our next one here, now this one, I recall a little bit from our previous conversation. This is a very striking image. We've got a very detailed graphic of a young colored soldier. We've got some interesting font face here. Can you please say a little bit about Crispus Attucks for folks who may not be familiar with the story?
Absolutely. Crispus Attucks, who this is named for, was a man who was killed during the Boston Massacre in 1770 in the crisis leading up to the American Revolution. He was African American and had Native American ancestry too. And he's been a figure, a symbol in the African American community for many years. Of African-American sacrifices during American crises. So after the revolution in the 1800s and the early 1900s, he was symbolically important in that way. This poster comes from fundraising efforts, also in the World War I era in Philadelphia, to raise money for something called the Crispus Attucks Circle for War Relief, which worked to raise money for a new hospital for African-American members of the military in Philadelphia.
Okay, and what were the reasons behind that? Why the need? What was the crisis that this circle was responded to?
So African-American soldiers were being denied equal access to medical care.
Wow. Okay. And so I appreciate the very Philadelphia focus that we are honing in at the very beginning of these cultural resources. And at this moment, I do want to pause and let folks know that what we are going through is a Learning Lab collection. And here we have a blog that I'm going to ask Amanda about in a second, if she can provide some more context in terms of what folks might find at this blog. But for anyone who is interested in going back and looking at these cultural resources later on, we will have them available for you all. You can click through them. You'll able, if you want to make your own Learning Lab collection, you can copy them using this right here. If you want to share it with someone who's interested in this topic, you can use this button right here and this icon to get it out and distribute it as well. Okay, Amanda, can you say a little bit more about this blog? We don't necessarily have time to read it, but if you could let us know, what might we find out if we read about how Black Philadelphians fought for soldiers during World War I? What is the extra texture this blog will provide?
Right, so the blog tells the story of a couple of men who were aided by the Crispus Attucks Circle. It tells about their service during World War I, and it goes on to describe the community, the group that came together to raise funds and to create the hospital. They were working with a large group of people.
Okay. So the Crispus Attucks Circle poster is definitely the teaser, the trailer for this blog. Please go read it and find out some more information. Thank you, Amanda.
Sure.
All right, we're gonna head back to our collection, and we're gonna shift a little bit here in terms of community. So we really focused a lot on, Black Philadelphia, on the Near East, all during World War I. Here we have a China Street Fair poster. Now, where are we in time now, Amanda? What moment in U.S. history are we looking at? What is the crisis being responded to in this poster?
This poster is from 1973, and it's from a health fair that was held in New York City's Chinatown.
Okay, and it looks like, if we zoom in here and we look at the different events, we've got health, education, housing, legal education, and elderly going on all at once. Now, do we know what was the outcome of the street fair? How did it go? Is there a legacy of the street fair that we can look into?
Absolutely. So the first street fair that this group of activists organized was held in 1971. A group of young Asian American activists organized a health fair to study and explore community health needs because they knew members of the Chinese American community were being denied equal access to health care. And they also understood that access to health care was related to other needs. Those activists started off with the fair, and their efforts quickly expanded. They established a health clinic in a church basement, and over time it's grown. It's still in existence. It's now an influential community health center that has multiple locations in New York City and serves tens of thousands of people a year.
Wow. So, I mean, that's a wonderful story in terms of how folks came together and recognized and understood some of these overlapping needs that their community faced and pulled their resources together. And now several clinics around the city. That's great. That's wonderful. All right. We do want to pause here. Eden, is there anything you'd like to say before we continue on to our next set of resources?
No, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment box. Amanda and Orlando have wealth of knowledge in their positions, so please utilize this amazing function.
Thank you, Eden. And much like the other blog provided context in terms of the Crispus Attucks Circle and the funds that were raised in Philadelphia to get some of these Black war veterans the medical attention that they needed. We've got another blog here that will give you some more context about giving in health and the way that those overlapped in previous moments of U.S. history as well. We are going to shift to another topic and another theme here. And we're going to talk a little bit about Lulac. And we have this crest right in the middle of this poster. And much like folks may or may not have known about Crispus Attucks, folks may or may not know about Lulac. So Amanda, can you please let us know what Lulac is?
Yes, Lulac is the League of United Latin American Citizens. It was founded in Texas in 1929, and it's a civil rights organization.
Okay, all right. And what do we have here? What is this cultural resource and how was it used?
So this is a poster that was used in a 2006 immigration rights march in Washington, D.C. There were also marches held in other parts of the country. To translate it into English, it says justice and dignity for all the immigrants.
Okay. Do you happen to know, you mentioned it was in 2006, what was the demonstration about at that time?
So there were rallies and protests in Washington and elsewhere on behalf of undocumented people in this country to promote their rights.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier on that the Lulac is a civil rights organization founded in Texas. We have here, one way in which they responded to the needs and the plight of undocumented peoples. Do you know of any other sorts of issues that, that Lulac has been involved in?
It's been involved in a broad range of civil rights issues for almost 100 years.
Okay. Now, for folks who maybe aren't interested in some of these issues, Amanda mentioned that this was used in 2006 at a demonstration on behalf or supporting undocumented people in the United States. Tomorrow, we will be talking a little bit more about undocumented peoples. Again, also answering this question about our moral responsibility during times of crisis. So please check that out if that is something that you are interested. 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, we've got some more blogs here that talk about Latino giving. Can you say a little bit more about Latino giving, and what this blog would give us more context about?
Right. So that's a story that the story of Latino giving is really complex. And this is something I'm working on collecting around. This is a new collecting area for me. I'm working on identifying and collecting objects for the museum to tell these really compelling and powerful stories. And like giving in other communities, it's complex. There's a range of ways people have given, including to help family members or communities from people's native home countries to stand up for rights like Lulac has done in this country. Some of the there's one story that you can read about there about a doctor named Hector P. Garcia from Texas who worked to create something called the American GI Forum to support Latino veterans. He was also from Texas. You can see the story of the Lulac poster that we were just looking at here too. The picture that you're showing right now is Dr. Hector P. Garcia, who founded the American GI Forum. He also gave a lot of medical care free to poor patients. So a whole range of ways of different people in different communities have exercised their moral obligation.
Okay. No, this is great. And then thank you for sharing this blog, this resource, that there definitely does seem to be a swath of different kinds of Latino giving experiences here. So thank you very much. All right, we are getting a little bit closer to the end of our time together. So we're going to go back to our collection and let's talk about this resource here. All right. Now, I will say on a personal note, like when my two kids were born, you all asked about where they were earlier. They're over there learning right now. But, I was a grad student. Their mother was also going back to school. So we sought out as many cultural resources, community resources as possible. Can you tell us about the Greater DC Diaper Bank?
Yeah, the Greater DC Diaper Bank is an organization in the DC area that provides diapers to social service organizations that work directly with family. So it helps people to meet their basic needs during difficult times.
Do we know the history of this particular organization, how long they've been around, or the connections they have with other organizations? You mentioned that they work with other community resources. Do we know more about that?
Yeah, the DC Diaper Bank was established in 2010, and it works with a large network of social service organizations in DC. That's how a lot of social service organizations work. They're really networked.
Okay. Now, that's the front of the t-shirt. And then here on the back, we have a quote that, I'd like for us to talk about for a little bit, empowering families with essentials to thrive. Can you say a little bit about, what moral responsibilities are during times of crisis, and a larger way to conceptualize that, how should we think about responsibility during times of crisis?
Right, so I think there are a couple ways that we can think about it, and this t-shirt expresses a couple different ways. One is to think about our moral obligation to help other people in times of crisis by providing aid if we're in a position to be able to do that. The other way I think we can think about it is the dignity of seeking assistance, being morally responsible to your family if you are experiencing hardship. And I think that this t-shirt is getting at that idea. There's dignity to seeking help by stressing that families are being empowered by coming to get these essentials.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there is, sort of a sense of empowerment both in contributing, if one is able to contribute, but also in, like you're saying, the dignity of seeking out assistance. So in both regards, on both sides of the spectrum, there is empowerment. Is that what you're
right.
suggesting?
If you're seeking assistance, you're being morally responsible to your family. You're helping your family. Moral obligation doesn't go just one way, and aid and support doesn't go just one way.
Okay.
Amanda, I'm sure a lot of our viewers might be surprised to discover that we have a t-shirt in our collection, which leads me to one of the questions that Magdalena asked, is if we are currently collecting objects related to the COVID-19 health crisis, and if so, what type of objects are we looking for and are we collecting?
So the museum is currently collecting around this health crisis in all its complexity, and different curators are looking for different kinds of objects. We really look for objects that tell rich, human-centered stories about how people are experiencing this, how it's affecting work, how it's affecting giving, how it's affecting health and medicine, how it's affecting the business world. So there are really a lot of different kinds of objects people will be looking for. But what's important is that they tell human stories.
So that when we think about the cultural resources, the objects that we have in our collections, it's not really about the object itself so much as what the object is able to convey about human experience. Is that accurate?
I think it can be both. I mean, if you go back to that silver trumpet, the object is important. I mean, those African-American women chose a ceremonial and significant object to make their point. So it's significant that they chose this type of object, but the meaning comes from the inscription and the knowing the context and the incident behind it.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda, for the clarification. Now, as we're winding down our time together, I do want to point out a few more blogs that we have for you here if you are interested in learning more. We have this one, When Philanthropists Convince People to Save Lives. And then we have Making Money and Doing Good, the story of an African-American power couple from the 1800s. We have the story of Elizabeth Keckley, who was a businesswoman and a philanthropist. We also have some information about mothers in World War I and the work that they did. Again, giving towards the. Can you remind our viewers again one more time of the more all-encompassing idea of what philanthropy is? Because I really appreciate the way that you are helping us think about it.
Yeah, philanthropy is giving time and effort, or giving money, other resources like food or diapers, to promote social change and to support other people.
Okay. And each of these blogs are ways, get at stories of folks who were doing just that, contributing in one of those various ways to create social change.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, Amanda, we have reached the end of our time together. I want to thank you for being here with us, and for folks who are out there and are interested in seeing these a little bit more slowly, maybe taking some time to read the blogs. You can find these resources on the website here that we have put up on this tile. It will also be available to you on the comment section of this webcast once we archive it. And Amanda, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with as we take off? Anything that we should consider?
Oh gosh, I would love feedback. I'm always interested right now also in hearing how other people are thinking about this question of moral obligation, stories you're seeing in your community, in your life. So comments that help us to understand the meaning of this question today would be really meaningful.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, and I appreciate the note that you're ending this on with us today, because we, for folks who are out there, we want to let you know that the work that we do at American History really is in partnership with you all. We are your museum, and I appreciate, Amanda, how you're framing the work that, if you have something you'd like to share, because that's how we operate in our office as well. So thank you very much, Amanda. Feedback from folks is very important to us as well.
Thank you for having me on.
Yep. Thank you, Amanda. Eden, you want to exit us for today?
Yes. So I do want to note that all of our blogs on our museum website, and including the ones on the Learning Lab resource page, have been written on an 8th grade reading level. So they are student friendly. There's a lot of research materials there. Some of them have been written by our curators, like Amanda. So please utilize the Learning Lab resources that we've provided today. All of the videos, including this one, will be archived. So please come back and rewatch anytime at the same link. We'll be here tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time for another episode looking at the same question: what is our moral obligation during times of crisis, but through a different lens? If you are an English language learner or learning Spanish as an additional language, you can tune in at noon Eastern Time today and tomorrow for a conversation of the same question, but in Spanish. We hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and have a really great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.